the day is Melissa Foyles. She brings lots of fun conversations and talking about all the topics that it's in the forefront of our mind now. Of course, compliant FCRA, what's happening with the CFPB, why get involved with PBSA, why it's important to network in the industry, and all the other tips like get involved with Capitol Hill and why that's so much fun. And I didn't even know what that really entailed, but she deep dives into everything. So stay tuned, stick around. We'll have an awesome conversation coming to you.
I am really excited to welcome Melissa Foyles, president of ILYM Consulting. She's been a really driving force in our background screening industry since 2012. She specializes in FCRA compliance, employment regulations, and drug testing. She helps companies navigate accreditation and strengthen their compliance programs. Melissa's a dedicated lifelong learner. She holds multiple master's degrees and recently completed Harvard Business School's Management Essentials program. And as a member of PBSA Board of Directors, she actively contributes to shaping the future of background screening. I met Melissa when she was still working for a CRA, so really excited to talk to her in her new role as a consultant.
Oh, what an intro. Thank you, Megan. I appreciate that. I'm so glad to be here. This is really exciting.
So let's get started. Melissa, we want to hear about your career a little bit. Why did you get started in the background check industry, and how did you find your niche in compliance?
Well, I think that this is like the age-old question that everybody laughs when you get asked, because I never had any intention growing up to be in this industry. Had worked retail for many years back in my previous life. And then when I had my daughter, wound up going back to school and was getting my education. And then, of course, the 2008 recession happened. And it was just a really, really difficult time, and was trying to figure out which way I was going to go. And then I had an intern opportunity with LexisNexis back when they actually had a background screening division. And I met just I honestly one of the very best managers that I ever had that was extremely passionate about background screening, and really talked about during that internship opportunity just about the human element of what we do. And he was, it just made me fall in love with it, because it was just the fact that it was impacting people's lives. And so that's what kind of got me in the door. And then moving through that, I was in inside sales and account management, and working for a large group that we kind of realized early on that if you went from desk to desk to desk, we actually did like a Pied Piper kind of thing, where we went from actual account manager's desk to account manager's desk. And as we went, that person would join the rest of the group, and we like wound up being the huge group going around the whole floor, and everybody had a different answer to different questions. And so I realized very early on in my career that compliance is extremely important. And so even though I was very fresh in the industry, I started to kind of build a compliance library just for our division. And soon after that, I went to a startup company that they needed everything from start to finish: fulfillment, operations, accounting, everything. And that's where I did the accreditation. So they were one of the smallest organizations that ever had achieved accreditation. From there on, I was hooked, because I learned just so much about the industry just going through that process. So I think it's honestly, it was a pivotal point for me to really just fall in love with compliance.
And then you took that to the next thing and the next thing, and that became your niche, right? That's so awesome.
Yeah.
I feel like all of us kind of got into this industry somewhat by accident, and then we kind of all stayed for that same reason that you were saying. Like, it does feel like we're helping people, like I think sometimes it's easy to forget that those names on the screen are actual real humans. So for our team, we're always reminding them of that and where our mission truly is. But it does feel like we're making a difference if you take that to heart and really keep that in mind. It's really exciting. And I come from the hospital setting, right, where I prevented people from dying, and I can say that I feel like I make more of a difference in this role, building people's lives and helping them grow, than I felt fulfilled in the hospital setting. So that's a little piece of me for you. But as far as scope and the reporting guidelines, if you're like, walking into a fresh, company, they're here, they want you to consult for them. Any idea on what you would suggest for them as far as scope? Let's start there.
And I would say that when I come in a consulting role, because it is so different depending on the background screening company, because especially like with accreditation, I mean, there are certain levels or certain standards, and of course you've got to make sure you're complying with local jurisdictions and the state specific laws and regulations. But I really try to first understand the philosophy of the background screening company, because I've worked for some, and in fact, I've worked for some that think that if you don't have a stack of, 100 pages, that you haven't done your job. And then I've gone to others that have a much more conservative and have a much narrower vision of what should be reported and why. And a lot of that kind of goes in line too with like the fair chance laws that are in effect, and where there are certain states and jurisdictions that have very specific laws about it. Some people want to, some background screening companies look at it as, well, if I'm doing that in this state, why not do it in this state, so that everyone is on an equal playing field. So it's really first trying to understand the philosophy. For me personally, and I have some clients that kind of fall into this perspective as well, that they are very much about having the 7-year rule. They've been able to educate all their clients, and their clients agree and have bought in that they like the 7-year rule for everybody, that they don't report dismissed cases. And there's different philosophies for that. So some would say, well, the fact that they even had to go through the system, that there was enough evidence there for them to actually have a court case. So maybe they feel like it should be reported, even if it was acquitted at the end. Or there are those that have the mindset that, well, they've gone through the court system, they've gone through the whole judicial process, and they were found not guilty, so why should this be held against them? So I don't know that I have a straight answer with that there's one that's better than another. It's really just making sure that, one, whatever you're doing, one, is in line with what the laws are, that you are within the confines of the law, but also that you're really educating your clients and that they understand. Because there's some, if you're not telling your client, hey, we're not going to give you any dismissed cases, well, then if they're comparing you to another background screening company and they do report that, well, now the client's very confused, and they're thinking that maybe you're withholding information, or that you didn't find that information, or that you don't know what you're doing. So it's really just important that whatever your philosophy is and how you operate, that you're letting your client know, that you have the client's buy-in, that they understand what it is that they're buying.
Makes complete sense. Like, if you were to be consulting for a wholesale company, for example, would that be a different approach than the CRA company? Because, the FCRA law specifically, it's very ambiguous on the definition of furnisher of information versus who is technically considered a CRA.
Yeah, so let me just start off by saying I am not legal counsel. So make sure you have great legal counsel. But I would say I think that honestly, from a wholesale perspective, because you don't know what your clients are necessarily doing, or you can't tailor fit all of your data and information. I mean, that would be a lot of changes by client per their individual client. So that's a lot of layers there. I would say probably it's like that's the fire hose. Like as much as what's legally reportable from that perspective, and then let your clients start to whittle it down. So like if you have filters available that can help them to kind of narrow or widen that scope, that or having that conversation. But I think from a wholesale perspective, if you try to make it a real tight filter from the very beginning, that's going to make it more difficult for the information that you're giving. And if the clients, your CRAs, are needing more information for one client versus another, that gets a little hairy. So I would say probably from the wholesale perspective, to kind of leave it as wide open as possible.
And, to add to this, when we speak to the clerks, sometimes, since from the wholesaler perspective, I'm in operations, so often they're talking to the clerks. Sometimes they don't even know. They say, well, I think it's 10 years. And you'll say, well, I just got back something that was 20 years when I requested a search with you last week. And they'll say, oh, like in Nevada, in one of the courts, it started this whole 2-month email chain where they finally said, yeah, we can give you that after all. So I'm glad you asked that question, Izzy, because we in the field all the time are trying to figure that out court by court.
And also like our different clients, right? I personally feel pretty confident because we're not giving the report to the end user as wholesalers, right? So technically, kind of that's what defines us as wholesalers or furnisher of information by the definition of CRA, of the FCRA. But again, when it comes to litigation, it's such a gray area. It's all depends on the judge and what he feels like you are at that moment and whatever more compelling story like that you bring to the table at that moment, right? So it does make me nervous still, being in this position. I feel like we're somewhat open to goodwill of the people in some ways, but I think that's just litigation altogether, right?
Well, and I think that when you're making a decision with what you're going to do, what your steps are, what your process is, if you kind of start it from, if I was sitting in a witness stand and I'm having to defend this in front of a court, can I defend my decision? And when you kind of think of it backwards that way, and that's kind of one of my things that I always tell people, because I ask a ton of questions and probably to the point that I get on people's nerves, but I say, I'm really thinking about this of, if I'm getting grilled by an attorney and I'm having to defend what it is that we're doing, if I think of it in that way, then hopefully I'm going to make a better decision than just it's going to make the most amount of money instead of it's going to give the right amount of information. So it's kind of looking at it from a different perspective with that. So, and I do also understand, and I think that's where, to your earlier question, that depending on like the appetite of risk that a CRA has or that a wholesaler has, there's different levels of it. So you kind of have to balance the level of risk, the business decisions versus the compliance decisions. And I honestly, I mean, and this could be right or wrong, but I think the more that a wholesaler touches that information and filters that information from your perspective, it makes you more of a CRA because you're manipulating that data more. So, so I think that it's really making sure you have really good documents, documented processes and procedures, and that your team understands, and that your team understands why. I think because that's something that when I come in, I'm like, why are you doing this? And a lot of times people don't know why. And so it's like, think about that because it helps to kind of help you decide which way you're going to go with that.
Melissa,
Makes absolutely sense.
when I was
Go
doing
ahead.
research, we always heard about heinous crime exceptions as far as a CRA. So if you were advising a CRA, you found, I'd say the scope was 10 years, but 11 years, you see, I don't know, a rape case, something awful. What do you tell that CRA to do? I always had a really big problem ignoring that case.
Well, so and I totally agree with that, and that becomes where it's a judgment call, and then you're doing things outside of your SOP, and then now you're getting into that murky zone where now it may not be defensible because you're not doing what you're saying you're doing. But if you're looking at like a rape case, let's just go with that example. If you're also doing a sex offender registry on top of that, the sex offender registry would still be active today. So hopefully that would be a catch-all there to catch that. So even though it's outside of that scope that you had, that would be a current event that hopefully you would be able to actually report that. So it's kind of, again, it's how you're documenting it, how you make that determination. But I'm with you. I mean, because it's, let's just say it's some horrible something that doesn't put them on a registry, and now you can't report it. It's difficult, but when you start to move outside of your SOPs that are, and maybe if you do have an exception in there to say like for these specific crimes, if it is outside the scope, but as long as it's documented that it's that way your team isn't forced to make decisions.
Yeah.
We always equip our researchers with such lists, not to share all their secrets, but of heinous crimes. No matter what, if you see this, report it. It's going to be up to our client from there. But that's the sweet spot of wholesaler.
Totally. And I think a big part of that too, just because this is such an important topic, honestly, like, right? If you miss a heinous crime, it's such a big deal, like to everyone. like for us, we always look at sentencing also. Generally, big crimes bring sentencing into scope oftentimes. So that is a big part of how you can kind of loop those big crimes into, that timeline you're looking for.
I'm glad you said that, because I wanted to mention that as well, because a lot of times, to your point, Izzy, there's in these reports that we get that we only see like the disposition date, that we are not going to see the actual when are they released from prison or from jail, when are they off of parole or probation, and when is that last piece of activity, and how do you define that, right? And that's a very valid point, to understand the actual conviction and the sentencing, and how that impacts the time frame.
Absolutely.
I had a client that said, can you just define what 7 years means? And I said, do you have 8 hours? It's just,
when I hear people say, oh yeah, just from the file date, I'm like, that's really simplifying things like way too much.
Well, yeah, that if all clients were like that, man, that would be so easy, but it's not. No, we just do sentencing, because that's like, okay, that includes everything. Can't miss it, within scope. That's kind of the way we train our team to do. So,
but we've been in the micro perspective, and we're about halfway through this already. So I kind of want to zoom out, because it's 2025. I don't mean to jump ahead of the questions, but I know, Megan, you had a good one that you wanted to ask.
Yes, the federal government, Melissa. They seem to be entering uncharted territory, we'll just call it that, with their drastic reduction in the federal workforce and their chaotic restructuring or elimination of federal agencies. We know that. We've all been talking about it. We know that the elimination of the CFPB or any regulatory agency doesn't necessarily nullify the statutes that govern the regulatory agency. So what does this mean on a very basic and pragmatic level? Is anything actually going to change?
There is enforcement bodies. There is case law that's there. There's precedent. So there is still some structure there. And I think that what we were all anticipating for 2025 was the upheaval with the CFPB coming down with the rulemaking. So now it's almost like we can take a sigh of relief, and that maybe that's not going to happen as far as those complex questions and rules like changing there. But now we're also looking at, okay, so if CFPB is gone, but the plaintiff's attorneys never sleep. They're always going to be there. So that part, I don't think it's going to really change. I think it's, especially with all of the turmoil that's kind of happening in every aspect of the federal agencies right now, to just keep making sure you're sticking to what you've been doing, and that you're staying compliant, and keeping your head down and just working forward. Because a lot of times, especially with all of the big announcements and the shutting this down we're seeing that it's not really happening, and it's coming back, and it's reversing directions.
Okay. I'm excited to see what happens as far as like data breaker rules, because we know that has such serious implications on the wholesale industry.
Yeah, because that was basically turning everybody into a CRA, right? I mean, that was kind of putting everybody under a deeper microscope, so to say. So, and then also the other thing was the rule that anybody who asks for a report, that all the CRAs are supposed to treat that as a full file disclosure, which was, I mean, creating a lot of panic because of just all of the aspects of what is a full file, and does that go all the way down to your invoicing and all your communications and it started to become a lot of kind of chaos with that, to be honest. So that will be interesting to see if that gets rolled back, if there's going to be any commentary on that, or if just because of all the dust that's kind of up in the air right now, I think we're kind of in a holding pattern.
Key points then: screen through the chaos, stay calm, wait and see what's going to happen.
Very good. Yes.
That seems to be like, just wait and see. Let's see what's going to happen. I think
it like a sledgehammer that's going kind of at different things. I'm not adding value to it, whether it's good or bad. We can all decide outside of this podcast, but I think of it as just the pieces are still falling from all the kind of structures that are in flux. So yeah, I think the holding pattern. How long do you think that's gonna last, Melissa? I know that's such a hard question to answer, but
I have no idea, but I am excited about the upcoming conference and the Advocacy Day and being able to be on Capitol Hill to go speak. And I'm hoping that I can take a little side if I'm not already scheduled to meet with my representatives and senators. I'm already today writing all of them to where they are going to recognize my name at the end of the day, because I'm really starting to just speak up for what I believe in, but I want to be able to kind of go and hopefully just go say hello, even if it's just to pop my head in one of the offices. But and in fact, if you've never done Advocacy Day, I think Megan, you're going to be there, right?
I'm so excited. It's been a few years since I've been on Capitol Hill.
Fantastic. And Izzy, are you going to be there?
I'm not going to be there to the mid-year, no, but definitely next year though. I'll be there. We kind of did a divide and conquer approach to all of our conferences
sending a
this year.
representative.
Yeah,
So Robin, will you be there?
Not this time, no, because I'll be at the NDASA and
Oh, I'll be there
SHRM.
too. I'll be there the next week.
Oh, nice. I'll see you there.
Yeah. So yeah, I've got like 2 weeks back to back, but I actually did the Advocacy Day for Endesa as well. And it's just honestly, it's just really fascinating to be there, to get to be face to face with the staffers, who are honestly, it was kind of a joke with that, was that they're kind of like they look like they're about 12 years old. So I'm showing my age right now, but it was just really interesting to see the passion and just the amount of questions and the engagement that we found there. And PBSA is definitely, it's the same. I highly recommend getting involved with the Advocacy Days.
So important.
What does that look like? Like Megan and Melissa, kind of walk us through. We've never participated in anything like that, Robin and I. So honestly, I can't even visualize. Like, are you guys like literally like with signs at Capitol Hill? Like,
no.
Hey, is that what that?
Yeah.
What's happening?
We have actual meetings.
Yeah, it is an action-packed day where you're walking all through Capitol Hill. You're in the different buildings. Megan, did you like go through the bowels? And actually, there's an underground subway that you can walk. Yeah, did you do that? Yeah. Oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah.
Inside of Capitol Hill, there's a train.
So it runs in there, so all the senators can take it. When I was at the Graduate School of Political Management in DC,
cool.
We actually got to go down there and like we got a tour from one of the senators. It was pretty awesome.
It almost feels like a little kiddie ride. It's open air but it's really cool, and it is a lot of walking. So do not bring like a new pair of shoes that you're trying to break in. In fact, I've seen some people will wear their tennis shoes. I found a pair of, they feel like tennis shoes, but they look kind of like dress shoes. I mean, it's almost, I guess, Izzy, you would understand, like almost like nurse shoes with that really thick. But be prepared. It is a lot of walking. But
stilettos last time I was there, which was the dumbest thing ever. My feet took forever to recover. It was such a mistake.
That just made my feet hurt just thinking.
I know. I was like, oh, this was a mistake.
But it is where you come in and you're speaking to their reception, and you will have they prepare you. So the GR the Government Relations Committee, they have everything prepared. They create beautiful takeaways so you can leave beautiful documents. Nice. They do all the marketing and all of that. You have your key points you go in with, and then you have your captain, and then I love to be the scribe, because as much as I'm talking today, I usually kind of get a little shy because I'm just a political nerd. So I like to write the notes and keep the scribing for the end, because you want to have all your notes to turn back over to the PBSA leadership so that they have that at the end. So it's really important to make sure you're collecting business cards, you're taking good notes, even like personal things. Like we had one that she had just gotten engaged, and she got a watch for her engagement instead of a ring. So we made sure to like even put those kind of notes in there, just so that it had that personal touch. So when our PBSA advocates were reaching back out, that they had something, a point of reference for that.
It sounds really exciting, actually. I never realized it would be like this level of, excitement. So maybe next year, Robin and we really got to be there and participate. I was really just envisioning everybody like on the steps
No.
with some signs, let's do this. I'm like, I'm ready to do it either way. But that's awesome. So that comes, of course, within PBSA, which leads me to my next question. Involvement in PBSA is something that I don't think we can speak about enough, right? Like getting involved. What guidance and what kind of tips you would give to a newcomer that wants to really establish themselves in the industry? What would you say?
Yeah, I would say don't wait until you know it all or that you feel 100% in your role. Like jump in. The committees, you don't have to come in and be a voice. You don't have to come in and be an expert. You can come in and actually learn and be an observer. Your newer employees, bring them in, get them involved, tell them to sit in and just sit in for a 30-minute or an hour committee meeting. Get into the PBSA website, start to look in the resource center, listen to some of these webinars, because I think a lot of times where you have an employee who's doing the work, who's grinding it out all day long, if you start to get them in those calls and they start to hear those gems and they're starting to understand like why decisions are being made, it brings out another level of excitement and engagement. And I think that is just huge. So it doesn't have to be your VP of this, whatever. Bring in your junior level employees, because those are the people that you want to be getting up to that level at some point. So I really believe that because with any organization, when you sign up and you get into PBSA, all of your employees are automatically in there. Like get on a committee call, like just listen in and see, because there's so much there. I honestly, I learned so much just from getting in those committee meetings. And then I started to learn like other people that were in it. And then that's how you start that network. And I mean, it's a great way to really understand and hear perspectives from other organizations without, nobody's giving away their secret sauce, like Robin was saying earlier, but you're not giving away your secret sauce, but everybody's going in that same direction and wants to do the right thing. So it's a great way to get a better perspective than just how your organization does something.
Okay, guys, lightning round, because we're getting towards the end of our podcast. So just a few questions left. Melissa, what states and bills are you watching and why should we care about them? Quick.
Watching a lot of states and bills, and that is why, again, the GR committee is so important. Texas has kind of gone off and is spiraling out. So it's very interesting to see what's going on there. So that is one that I'm definitely keeping an eye on.
I know Megan and Congressman West, she wants to meet him so bad.
BFFs.
I'm reaching out. I'm determined to get him on this podcast to tell us why he hates us.
No. Just to understand the mindset and where they're coming from. Yeah.
I want to know because I think we actually have the same goals. I think we're coming at them in a different way. So I don't think we're that different.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm privacy. I love the privacy laws and I'm fascinated by all of that. And right now with AI too, and the new legislation that's coming out, and there's a lot of rapid fire legislation coming out, like in New York, my mind is going blank. There's also, just really quickly before, just as something to mention on that, is that there is a action center with PBSA that they do have an action tracker that you can go into, that we all have access to. That you can actually watch the bills through the PBSA website. It's a really cool interactive tool. You can click on the state and you can see what's going on, but they also already have, and that's what the GR committee is doing is, and you can put in your official's name or you can put in your address and everything, and it'll tell you who's your official. So if you don't have all that information, which is, don't be ashamed of that, you can actually go in there. It'll tell you, there's already bills that are already in here that you can just pull up the website and check it. But that's one of the resources through PBSA, and good reason why you want to have a login to the website, so that you can get in there and actually follow everything and be able to see it in real time.
And honestly, I don't think there's another way. That's another one of our rapid fire questions. With the daily changes happening, how can smaller companies stay informed and ensure compliance without feeling overwhelmed? So I'm so glad that you proactively shared that resource. Are there any other specific channels or platforms you recommend?
Yeah, well, and as far as like just with having good resources with established laws, and maybe not those that are like in the midst, but all the law firms, say for DeWitt, your big law firms, Larry Henry with BRB, like they all have packets and they have tools that you can use either like to put behind a paywall for your clients and that your operations teams can use. But as far as like any legislation that's in progress, get involved on the GR committee call. And again, that is one it's very organized. They operate, they do all of the presentations every month. And then also this link for PBSA has for the action tracker.
33% of our membership wanted crazy industry stories. So Melissa,
you're going to go there.
What is your favorite tale from an industry conference that you can safely share on a public forum that you can maybe tell us the non-shareable stories later? But for this podcast.
Well, and are you wanting like a social story or
whatever comes to mind?
Hey.
Jinx.
Well, I will say just one, it feels like when you go, it's like you're coming home to a family reunion. And so that just in seeing everybody running up to each other in hugs, like I've never seen industries hug the way ours does. My biggest thing, and it's kind of the name of my company, because Perry Morgan, do y'all know Perry Morgan?
I love Perry. He's our favorite person.
I always call him the mayor of PBSA.
But he's definitely, he's probably the president at this point, I feel like.
When he found out that my mom and I had a game that I would always say I love you most, and it was kind of like I always tried to beat her to say it first in the day. So sometimes like I would call her at midnight, the 12:01, just to be able to say it. So when he found out about that, he would make sure to tell anybody he wanted to introduce me to that story. So then he would make them, so I would hear people yelling over the exhibitor hall, I love you most, I love you. And it was hilarious because I knew Perry was behind it because he would have people to do that. So that for me personally, and he still does it to this day. He calls me every day to tell me that too. So
that is so cute.
Yeah, it's special. It's kind of how I honor my mom every day. She's not with us anymore. So but that is something that is special there. But also, I remember having one-on-one conversations in the past, like during breaks, saying, I really want to be a consultant. And speaking to some consultants that were just like, why do you want to do that? Like, why do you want to give up your full-time job? And having those conversations, and I kind of kept having those conversations and just meeting up with different people that were in that role. And like, I was afraid to take the jump. So those were really interesting conversations. And I'll just say, I mean, honestly, PBSA can party like nobody's business.
That I think we're all aware.
I was gonna say those are the stories that I was thinking of.
Well, yeah. So I'm trying to put it all over so Robin can decide which one she wants to go with.
Well, folks, this ends our second episode. Thank you to our returning listeners. And of course, welcome to our new listeners. If you missed our first episode, make sure you go back a little and check that out. We're going to be here every month, and we're excited to bring more engaging conversations to you. So thank you again for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode next month. Bye, guys.